Grazie. Buonasera. Mi dispiace di non parlare italiano, but I'm happy for you to listen to me, that you're willing to listen to me in English or in translation. I will try to speak slowly and allow some time for Q&A. So I will briefly talk about the IDPF and EPUB and then spend the most of the time talking about the new forthcoming ePUB3 revision. The IDPF is a not-for-profit trade and standards organization. We have close to 200 members from many different countries. Here in Europe, we have members from France, UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, and of course Italy. So I'm very glad to be here today, and we are all working together to advance the digital publishing ecosystem. And the principal activity we do is development of standards, of which the principal standard is EPUB. Before I describe EPUB, I will explain our philosophy about the importance of open standards. IT standards enable content and information to flow across system and organization boundaries. So standards are just like the plumbing or the railway system. And I understand that Italy was actually instrumental in the standardization of the railroad gauges because Italy was investing in railways before Italy was unified as a country. And so for the content to flow in the trains, you had to agree on the width across the many countries at that time and kingdoms and duchies that made up Italy. So you know the importance here of standards. Actually, someone else told me this was a lie, that Italy didn't standardize the railway gauges, but actually began with Julius Caesar, standardizing the width of the Roman roads. So Italy has been working on global standards for thousands of years. And they're very important for the information to flow. This is especially important for publishers because publishers of text-based content are used to distributing through many channels, not just one channel, but many different stores, libraries, educational institutions, etc. And readers are used to acquiring publications from multiple sources. They get books from different stores. They get books from other people. They get them from libraries. They get them from their schools. So we really need content to be able to flow easily in this disparate and diverse world. And that's even more true as content becomes liberated from its physical packaging, which is what one of the things digital enables, because that blurs the traditional boundaries that have separated the different parts of publishing. Things like books and magazines become potentially, less separate in the digital world, where an article can be distributed whether it came out of a chapter of a book or from a magazine. And our philosophy at the IDPF is that it doesn't make sense for access to books to be controlled by a few corporate entities. Even though some of these corporate entities that may like to control it are members of the IDPF, within this context, we are trying to create a level playing field. And as we've seen recently here in the Mediterranean, in the other side, that if one country can turn off the internet, that's very bad for communication. Imagine if one company or one country could turn off access to all your books. That's something we want to see. So EPUB is rapidly growing as the interchange and delivery format for digital publications that's based on web standards, based on HTML, CSS, and XML. It enables content that is structured and accessible to be interoperable across many different devices and applications for both downloadable content and online consumption in a browser. It's been developed by the IDPF for over 10 years, and the EPUB 2.0 became a standard in 2007. But it's really a pretty simple proposition. EPUB is HTML content with some additional navigational structure and metadata packaged in a zip file, given the .EPUB extension. This is not rocket science here. In fact, the appeal of EPUB is that it's built on the standards we all know and using in our other parts of our world. The emphasis of EPUB is dynamic layout. So by contrast, for example, PDF is a paginated format. PDF is content that you may say is typeset at the factory, and it always looks the same. If you have a PDF page, it's going to look the same. But if I have a small screen, or I want a large font size, the content that's been typeset into 3 or 4 columns may not be very easily readable. EPUB is designed to allow content to be dynamically typeset at the reader's point of consumption based on their screen size, their screen resolution, their preferred font size, etc. So a very different emphasis than PDF, although the similar concept is a portable document. Content that has everything you need packaged together that can be used across many different kinds of PCs and devices. we've been very pleased that EPUB was standardized relatively recently and quickly became adopted rapidly. Adobe, seeing the need for this reflowable format, quickly supported EPUB in several tools. Sony supported it in the Sony Reader, initially released in North America and then here in Europe. And in the following year, we had some key endorsements of EPUB by the Association of American Publishers and the UK Publishers Association, adopting EPUB as the standard format for digital trade books. As well, many other devices and software programs came on the market. And in 2009, Google began releasing EPUBs of public domain content. Well, I guess not everyone agrees it's public domain, but they began releasing EPUBs of content they were scanning. Sony converted their entire store to the EPUB format, and Barnes & Noble, the largest bookseller in the United States, released their Nook and a new ebook store completely based on the EPUB format. And then last year, I was very happy that Steve Jobs got on the stage to announce the iPad 1 and announced at the same time the iBooks application and said, our format is EPUB. Apple's not necessarily known for always using open standards, so it was great to have them adopt EPUB and promote it. And they've been actively involved with us in creating the next version. Now, in the last year, we've had more than 25 different dedicated e-readers come in the market, well over 25 different smartphone applications that support the EPUB format. And while it's not widely known, Amazon's Kindle infrastructure is largely now being powered by EPUB content being delivered to them from the major publishers. The major publishers are exclusively giving Amazon EPUB, and they are converting it into their own proprietary delivery format. So EPUB, again, is both an interchange and a delivery format. So we're happy to have Amazon as an adopter of EPUB in that sense, even if they're not yet natively supporting it in the Kindle devices. So this has been great adoption, but we realized last year that we needed to take the EPUB standard further, that people needed to create enhanced ebooks. They needed rich media and interactivity to take digital content beyond the boundaries of just digitized version of what's in print. And there are a number of other reasons that we needed to advance the standard. So last May, less than a year ago, we chartered the ePUB3 working group with some pretty ambitious goals. First, to make EPUB truly global, including the Asian languages and other scripts that have complex layout and not left to right horizontal layout. We wanted to improve the ability of EPUB to be used for more complex titles, including titles with both interactivity and rich media, but also more complex page formats where reflow can be challenging when you have more complex information designs. We also knew we needed to increase the alignment with modern web standards. HTML5 has rapidly become supported across all the major browser platforms and enables a new level of capabilities in HTML, and associated CSS modules also are advancing rapidly, whereas EPUB, having been standardized in 2007, was before that whole wave of new HTML5 and CSS3 work. And then last but definitely not least, we knew we needed to work to improve the conformance of the EPUB specification and also the accessibility results of EPUB. EPUB is beginning to be used for accessibility purposes. Having structured, reflowable content makes it inherently easier to make that content accessible. But we needed to take some steps to take that kind of to the next level. So this working group, which has been going on over the last year, has been truly global in scope. There's been over 100 active participants. We've had face-to-face meetings in New York City, San Francisco, Taipei, Taiwan, and Sapporo, Japan. So we really have been working this in a global way. And on February 14th, we published the first public draft of the ePUB3 specification for member and public review and trial use. And if you take away nothing else from this talk today, I hope you take away my request that you look at the ePUB3 specifications and provide your feedback, because now is the key time. The concrete is poured but is not hardened, and we need the feedback to make sure we can get it level, so to speak. And the intention is to reach a proposed draft, essentially a final stage, in May of this year. So really only a few months' time. Now I'll briefly explain to you what's in ePUB3. So one key area that I mentioned already is rich media and interactivity. We are supporting video and audio based on the HTML5 work in that area. We are also supporting the ability to synchronize pre-recorded audio with text. That has several uses. One is for accessibility, if you have a talking book, so to speak. It's also good for audiobooks, including audiobooks where you may want to have the ability to read the book at home and listen to the book from that place you started in a car. So having audio and text able to be synced is good. For children's books, you can have things like the bouncing ball over the words. So all of this is now enabled with the work we're doing with audio synchronization. We are making a requirement to support embedded fonts. HTML5 supports fonts, but doesn't say a browser must support them. We are trying to provide a higher level of consistency to publishers and saying that if you are an EPUB3 reading system, you need to support embedded fonts. We are also making SVG, scalable vector graphics, a requirement for reading systems, and making it a first-class data type along with HTML in EPUB3. This is very important because SVG is the same imaging model of PDF and PostScript. So really anything now you could represent in a PDF page or a sequence of pages, you can put into EPUB. We don't want to lose the reflowable nature of EPUB, but certain kinds of content, like a graphic novel or a manga, really requires this paginated representation. So EPUB can now embrace that as well. And last but not least, we have JavaScript support. So you can have scripted content, things like a quiz or an assessment or a simulation in a learning material or an interactive game embedded in a children's book. We've done this in a way that is modular and doesn't mingle together the JavaScript and the markup in the same way that is true of web applications on the web as a whole. We're trying to create, you might say, structured web content. And so we worked hard to both minimize the times where you need JavaScript, so that you don't need JavaScript for an image rollover or to connect a button to a pause button on a video clip, but you can do that in a declarative way in markup. We've also worked to make that JavaScript modular and separable from the rest of your content in a way that's more so than the web as a whole because of our needs for content to have longevity and for that content to be usable in a variety of contexts and again, accessible, where scripted content may have problems with accessibility. So that's a whole lot of rich media work, but we've also made a number of major other enhancements that would be enough to justify calling it EPUB3 even without all that rich media interactivity. We've now supporting XHTML5, the XML version of HTML5 as the core content type. We have vertical writing and supporting different writing directions. In fact, in this case, we are working closely now with the W3C CSS working group. We have a liaison established both directions, and we are actually working to advance the W3C core specifications for the CSS3 writing modes module because we are pushing this faster than the rest of the HTML community, faster than the browsers, because of our higher needs for typography to support the needs of Japanese, Taiwan, Chinese, and other typography. We have other styling and layout enhancements, including supporting the CSS3 multi-column module and other ways to make content more high layout as well as still being reflowable. We have improved metadata capabilities, including the ability to associate metadata on a word by word or element by element level. So we can have fine-grained metadata, which will enable a lot of very interesting applications for all of you guys to create. MathML, the XML language for typesetting mathematics equations, is a first-class required part of EPUB3. This means that you can know that EPUB3 reading systems can handle this, which is good not just for math texts, but also many kinds of scientific publications that need to have equations, that these equations can be accessible, can be dynamically formatted, and can be real text and graphics. And from an accessibility point of view, EPUB3 is completely converging with something called DAISY DT-Book, a format designed for accessibility that was already closely aligned with EPUB in the past, but now it is not going to continue any longer as a separate format, but rather EPUB3 will be the accessibility format for that DAISY community. And then again, last but not least, we've worked hard in EPUB3 for a more rigorous specification of both content and reading system conformance requirements. I can't stress enough that it's important to have interoperability to make sure you know if something's conformant. If you're going to have the railway going down the track, you better know that it's the right width. And so we're working hard here under the covers to make the specification more precise, developing of test suites, certification programs, etc., in addition to the new features. We're trying not, in fact, to get so focused on new features to lose sight of your need to make sure your content works across multiple devices and reading systems. We're also working beyond 3.0, you might say, to take our standards work further. So we are working on modular development of some new EPUB capabilities that aren't going to be in EPUB 3.0, but will be added to the EPUB family over time. And in fact, we probably aren't going to immediately work on an EPUB 4, but rather a set of modular extensions that then can be added in reading systems as it becomes convenient. One of those is dynamic formatting, dynamic templates, to enable rich layout combined with complex page templates, and I'll give you a brief demo of that in a second. Another is a dictionary schema, more advanced annotations and cross-document linking. We're putting the basics of fine-grained references to content in EPUB 3.0, but some of the more advanced annotation and cross-document linking capabilities will need to be built up on top of that foundation. And then we're discussing whether or not we need any kind of security or rights management capability. EPUB to date has not had any DRM technology defined, but that's led to some fragmentation as vendors like Apple and Adobe have created alternative DRM systems that don't work together with each other. We may stay away from this or not. That's going to depend on our member interest. We are going to increase focus on the whole product, not just the specs, but the rest of it, test suites, certification, validation programs. And we're also working with partners to create implementations in the open source community. JavaScript implementations that can work on top of any browser, and actually working in the WebKit source code base itself. For example, we're working to add the vertical writing support in WebKit that EPUB 3 needs so that Japanese browsers can support EPUB 3 natively. And last but not least, we're working on global adoption. We are committed to making EPUB an ISO level standard and are working with several different standards groups who are then collaborating with each other to figure out the optimized path to get EPUB into the ISO international standard with a capital IS, you might say, state. We're also working to improve alignments with related digital publishing organizations around the world to make sure we're all working together here to create this open standard. So in summary, we are taking the EPUB standard to a whole new level with EPUB 3, but I want to stress that EPUB 3 is an incremental step. It's not the destination. The theme of this conference is the future of books and the books of the future. I think we can see that the future of books is heavily digital. I don't personally think paper will be completely replaced, but it's clear that a significant amount of the consumption of books will be digital. So we know about the future of books. I don't think we know yet about the books of the future. You all will be inventing those. And our goal is to make EPUB 3 an innovation platform that gives you the basis to invent them. Just as when the web itself was developed, nobody said, we're going to do HTML and CSS so that we can do Facebook and Gmail. These kinds of innovations were built on that general platform. Our job at the IDPF, as we see it, is to develop a general platform that you guys can create new capabilities on top of. And before I finish, I want to show you one demo of the kind of things we're doing beyond EPUB 3.0 because we want your help. So this is a browser showing some EPUB content. You can see here it's got a pull quote in the middle, a very simple thing in the book world. You can see that as I resize, it's actually taking different quotes here because it's picking from a set of quotes. This kind of resizing would be very, very difficult to do in traditional CSS in a web page. As well, we have the ability to have shapes flowing around complex images like a circle. We can have the ability to have content that changes its styling as it goes from one region to another. So you can see the top region here is taking different amounts of content that fit based on the size, and that content's getting a particular size for the top. Again, trivial to do in a program like Adobe InDesign, but very challenging to make this work in an HTML and CSS way. And what this can enable is complex titles. Titles here like a digital magazine. Again, running in a standard browser, but based on EPUB with an extension we're calling page templates that is not part of the base EPUB 3, but we're looking to standardize shortly thereafterwards. As you make it larger, you notice it now changed the number of columns. So again, we've got dynamic adaptive layout here of a pretty complex publication with, in fact, not content that isn't just text and graphics, but includes things like SVG. So here I'll select this part of the graphic, and you can see that it's live graphic. So this little chunk of content here is SVG, not a bitmap image. So we think with this kind of capability, we're going to be enabling all kinds of journals, magazines, complex textbooks, things like that to be able to use EPUB to get some of the quality you might have in the past said, well, we need PDF for that, but also the dynamic adaptive layout so that when you need to make it to fit on your smartphone or your tablet, this content can intelligently adapt to the size you have as well as the font you want. So that's the vision we have for IDPF. And I urge you to get involved in that process. IDPF is an open organization. Anyone can be a member. We have members for publishers, vendors, service providers, authors. The EPUB3 specification is available at this website, and I encourage you to participate in the public review and contact me if you have questions. So here's the site for EPUB3. Again, all of these specs are available online, if you're online, which I'm not, and I encourage you to provide your review and help us make EPUB3 better and help us take the IDPF forward beyond EPUB3. So I think I have some time for a Q&A, so I welcome your questions and apologize that I may need you to ask in English or wait for the translation. Thank you.
Mr. McCoy, may I have more information about the... Posso avere più informazioni?
Microfono vicino.
Posso avere più informazioni sulla possibilità di lavorare movie, video e audio all'interno delle pagine?
Grazie.
Grazie.
Mr. McCoy, io vorrei sapere quali sono le prospettive di diciamo, interazione del contenuto EPUB con il mondo esterno in termini di tracciamento o di intercettazione di ad esempio risultati di interazioni che l'utente fa con l'oggetto. Lei prima ha fatto l'esempio della possibilità di inserire un quiz dentro il contenuto e ci si può domandare a questo punto dove possa finire il risultato dell'esecuzione di un test o di un quiz su una piattaforma, pensando ad esempio alle logiche tipiche del mondo dell'e-learning, no? Ad esempio le modalità con cui standard come lo SCORM trattano questo tipo di problematica.
Okay, so I'll respond in English and then she will translate. Yeah. So for the first question, which was about the audio and video in the ebook, we are standardizing formats like H264, and we're considering now WebM because there's some controversy in the HTML5 community about which video format is the most open and the most suitable. But what we want to do is give publishers the assurance that they can use certain video formats or audio formats and it will be supported in the content. And MP3 is for example, mandated as an audio format. So you know in EPUB3 you can use MP3 and have it work. Because we want ebook content and other digital publications to be archivable for decades or centuries, which is different than a web page. We have a stronger requirement here about being clear about the formats that can be utilized. As far as the synchronization of the audio and the text, this is done by a small subset of something called SMILE that we've incorporated. So the SMILE vocabulary allows basically providing a mapping between audio clips and the associated parts of the text. But how that gets used in practice will depend, again, on the authors. But the DAISY community, again, who's been doing audiobooks for many years, is completely working now on EPUB3. The president of our organization and the chairman of the EPUB3 working group are both employees of DAISY. So we are a very tight alignment now around the accessibility community for whom talking books are not a luxury but a requirement. So in the second question about learning objects and integration of EPUB into the learning community, we're very excited about that and have actually been discussing with the EU community members in Brussels and others who are trying to figure sort of the content side of learning objects. In the past, many learning objects have been a container around some proprietary program or a proprietary format like Flash. In this world where you have now standard JavaScript support across everywhere, if you can have a structured, packaged way to deploy that portably inside a learning object, that can lead to much more standardization and interoperability across learning systems, potentially. And EPUB could be just the ticket to enable that. But we're in the early stages of discussing that. We do have a lot of members in our organization, like Thompson Learning, McGraw-Hill, John Wiley, and others who are publishers focusing in the learning domain. And so we anticipate a lot of early work in EPUB to figure out how to add interactivity to digital textbooks, but also, and maybe more excitingly, how to figure out how EPUB can maybe help learning objects kind of go to the next level of interoperability. If you want to help, we'd love some help.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sì. Allora, McCoy, shall we ask in English or in Italian?
In Italian. Could you hear?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Just.
I could ask in English if you like, but it's okay. Parlo meglio l'inglese,
whatever you want.
Però proverò a parlare italiano. No, scherzo, sono italiano. Dunque, sempre riguardo al multimedia, ho letto il draft che avete pubblicato a febbraio, e a proposito, magnifico, ottimo lavoro, you did a great job, ma mi manca ancora, cioè vedo mancare ancora quella apertura all'esterno, qualcuno qui ha anche accennato nelle prime domande, in particolare alle sorgenti di contenuto che possono essere collocati altrove. Faccio un esempio molto banale, l'embedding di un video di YouTube. È possibile includere un contenuto dinamico in streaming all'interno dell'EPUB? Al momento no, e non l'ho visto presente nelle specifiche dell'EPUB3. E oltre a ciò, sempre su questa linea, se si prevedono anche delle aperture all'aggregazione di contenuti che provengono ad esempio da feed RSS e che possono servire per modificare dinamicamente il contenuto dell'EPUB in modo che possa avere una vitalità quindi un'obsolescenza meno immediata, no? Grazie.
Maybe I can answer this one. Yep. So first of all, EPUB3 does allow specifically video and audio content to be referenced remotely over the internet, which means you could have a dynamic YouTube video or something that you've deployed through a video service provider and have that be referenced from an EPUB publication. So and of course links, hyperlinks out to the web already are part of EPUB today. So we are explicitly saying you don't need to put the video file inside the EPUB package because in many cases the size will be prohibitively large. As well, you may want it to be dynamic. So that is you can do that. And if you read the spec and didn't realize we can do that, then it means we weren't clear enough in our spec. So I know it's there, but we will check it. Now, but as far as you raise a bigger issue, which is sort of the concept of a networked or dynamic publication that doesn't exist like a PDF as a file that you can put on a memory stick, but only exists, dynamically. And that's definitely something people are doing. We aren't defining, in a sense, the conformance requirement for this kind of network publication, but it absolutely is part of our vision that an EPUB file may be created from RSS feeds, from database queries, like other content, like HTML for that matter. It may be created on the fly and never exist as an offline consumed thing. That boundary between offline and online or portable document and web of content is going to be explored a lot, I think, as books become both more dynamic and more social in this new world we're all going to be inventing together.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Yeah.
Monica Turoni di Maggioli SPA. Volevo sapere se EPUB3 supporta anche modulistica, se è possibile con EPUB3 ottenere anche moduli in formato modificabile. Grazie.
Well, as someone who used to work at Adobe and helped to create PDF in the first place, I don't want to be negative about PDF. But while PDF has a rich forms capability, it is somewhat proprietary and very different than the way forms get created on the web. The infrastructure is all specific to PDF. And as a result, while PDF forms are pretty adopted, there's been some resistance because everyone has technology for creating interactive forms on the web, but sometimes you want that to be in a portable document, something you can be printed with high quality, something that can be downloaded and used offline. So EPUB, because it's based on HTML, supports all the forms capability of HTML and JavaScript. And the intention is that can be used to create forms that are very rich, but also you're using the web standards to build them. So your web development techniques and tools that you use to create online forms for the web can now apply to portable documents in a way that hasn't been true in the past. So how that gets used in practice will depend on the people publishing content. Certainly it will get used for things like assessments, but we see that EPUB3 could get adopted for, you might say, government and corporate documents, not just for professional publications. And we are seeing interest in that from some governments in Asia, for example, looking to potentially standardize on EPUB3 more broadly than just for, you might say, commercial publications.
Grazie, vorrei fare io un'ultima domanda a questo punto. Bill, can I ask you myself last question in Italian, if you can. We are again, okay. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Thank you. Accanto a molte note positive che tutti hanno percepito alla lettura del draft, non mancano in rete alcune critiche a volte anche molto aspre. Ha circolato molto in rete ad esempio un post del team leader di sviluppo di un progetto che molti in questa sala conosceranno, che si chiama Sigil, che è un progetto di editor open source per consentire agli autori di scrivere direttamente in formato EPUB, e il team leader di Sigil ha messo lì un post, al di là del linguaggio molto colorito che al netto, diciamo, del linguaggio colorito, rileva alcuni punti di critica, principalmente, almeno per quanto mi riguarda, un punto su cui forse può valere la pena di avere una tua opinione. Una delle critiche che vengono rivolte è che si è aperta la porta in maniera piuttosto netta all'utilizzo di JavaScript, e questo significa che anche se poi nelle specifiche viene suggerito di utilizzarlo solo se proprio necessario, però lui, non faccio il nome perché è troppo difficile da pronunciare, quindi perdonatemi, ma insomma l'autore di questo post dice poi in realtà una volta che è ammesso l'utilizzo di JavaScript tutti lo utilizzeranno, tutti i libri cominceranno ad avere i ghirigori che spesso vediamo in rete nei vari siti anche quando non serve, e questo farà sì che molti libri saranno sempre più leggibili solo su iBooks, insinuando il sospetto che ci sia dietro questo una certa azione di lobbying o di pressione di Apple rispetto alla definizione delle specifiche in questa direzione. Credo questa forse potrebbe essere una sede giusta per eventualmente, se vuoi, replicare anche a questo tipo di osservazioni.
So Antonio, that's a great question. The response is a bit the response is a bit complicated, but so first of all, I am extremely pleased that Apple has been heavily engaged in the ePUB3 working group, along, though, with some of their sharp competitors like Adobe and Google, who have also been actively engaged, and as well as the publishers, who certainly, you might say, are like the chickens watching the foxes. So the publishers, you know, like Random House and Simon & Schuster and Hachette Livre and others have been actively involved as well. So part of the IDPF is that we get competitors together to work on this open standard, but there's certainly everyone has their own interest. In this case, Apple already added the JavaScript support to EPUB in iBooks on their own, as you might say, an Apple extension. So the horse has left the barn, as we say, about scripting in eBooks, thanks to Apple. And the IDPF was faced with a choice. Ignore the demands for interactivity that many publishers have, publishers of children's books, where it's clear that adding interactivity will increase their sales. Magazines, who need interactivity, you know, their basic revenue stream is more from ads than anything else, and ads require interactivity to be engaging in the digital world. The needs for interactivity in the educational space are clear. You know, again, simulations, assessments, it's necessary. So we were faced with the choice of find a way to support interactivity that was as modular and safe as possible to maintain the declarative, accessible nature of EPUB, or keep it out and it will be added anyway by people like Apple, which was already happening. So we chose the former path, and we have done our best to create a structure that will still be highly accessible. And to me, that's a litmus test. If you can make your content still accessible to someone who's blind, then the chances are your JavaScript didn't destroy the content, so to speak. And because the chairman of our organization is both a DAISY employee and blind, and because the head of our working group is a DAISY employee and is very focused on accessibility concerns, we really have taken this seriously. Whether we got it perfect yet, is to be determined by how it gets used. And we are concerned that just as in the web, people could abuse things like tables to do crazy layouts in ways that were not ever envisioned that you would use a table for, people may use scripting in EPUB in ways that we look back on and say, that's unfortunate. I remember, because I've been working in this, sort of picking away at the coalface of digital publishing for many, many years, back in the PostScript days. People said to us, you should limit the number of fonts you can use in a publication. People are putting too many fonts, too many different fonts on a page. It's ugly. You should only allow 3 fonts on a page. And that could have been done, but I think, again, even though these things were crazy, it was important for the platform not to make policy decisions about the usage. We are working to keep JavaScript and EPUB separate so that it can be controlled, it can be optional, it can be disabled. We're working to minimize the cases where it's needed, but to put policy around it, we felt was beyond what the IDPF should do. But it is a criticism that we are attuned to and working hard to address. There are those who have been critics who have said just books shouldn't have any interactivity in them. And that I disagree with. That's a point of view. You may, as an author, say my books won't have any interactivity in them. But for you to say nobody's books should have any interactivity in them in the digital world, again, it's like saying you should only be able to use 2 fonts on a page. It's an opinion, but really it's not up to you to say for other people what they should use or not. And it seems clear to me that there's going to be interactivity in a lot of digital books. So we're going to enable it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill McCoy.